Hey, what's up everyone? It's Justin here, and today I've got the comparison for you between the new HTC One M9 and its predecessor, the HTC One M8. So I'm going to point this out right off the bat, and I'm sure you've noticed it from looking at these two devices side by side, that there really wasn't a huge leap from the M8 to the M9. Aside from a few spec bumps, a camera upgrade, and a few design refinements from the M8, the M9 was sort of what I'd call an S iteration from its predecessor, which some would say is a good thing, as the M8 was a pretty solid phone with a few things that just had to be tweaked here and there. But in this video, let's see if those changes make it a worthy upgrade. So when it comes to the specs, the HTC One M8 has a Snapdragon 801 processor clocked in at 2.3 GHz, and the HTC One M9 has a 2.2 GHz quad-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 810 processor with a quad-core coprocessor, so theoretically it is an octa-core device. The M9 features 3 GB of RAM and the M8 features 2 GB of RAM. When it comes to the design, both these devices are absolutely gorgeous. The M8 and M9 are both made out of a metal construction, but the M9, like I mentioned, does have a few refinements here and there to make the device a little bit easier to grip in the hand, as the M8 was a very slippery device, but nevertheless is beautiful. The M8 is available in gunmetal and silver, however there is also a gold model as well, while the M9 is available in the silver and gold model, which I've got here, and gunmetal. The M9 comes in slightly thicker at 9.61mm thick compared to 9.35 on the M8, and also a hair shorter at 69.7mm tall as opposed to 70.96. In addition to that, the M8 weighs in at 160 grams while the M9 comes in at 157 grams. Another thing you will notice that was changed this year is the button layout. The button is now located on the side as opposed to on the top, which others found it very hard to reach. But I really wonder why HTC did not move one set of the buttons to the other side, as it often gets confused to the volume buttons when trying to hit the power button. And instead of opting for a volume rocker that we saw before, the buttons are separate in terms of the volume. On the bottom, you've got the exact same port layout, the 3.5mm audio jack, as well as the micro USB port. On the top, you've got our IR blaster, and on the M8, you have the power button located there as well. You may also notice that the camera on the M9 does stick out just slightly. Moving on to the display, both these devices feature a 5-inch 1920 by 1080 resolution full HD display, which has a PPI of 441 by the way. Some people may have been disappointed that the M9 did not feature a QHD display like many of its counterparts in the market have, but I'm going to tell you that the general consensus is that a 1080p display is just fine, and the fact that it is a trade-off for battery life, many people are still fine with a full HD display. But from using QHD devices, in my experience, it is absolutely beautiful, and I feel like the market is heading that direction, so it would have been nice for HTC to sort of future-proof themselves in this year's flagship, and just add another reason to upgrade to their new flagship. Moving on to the software, both devices do run Android 5.0 Lollipop currently. However, the M9 does have the new Sense 7 skin, while the M8 runs the Sense 6 skin. But I'm going to tell you that there really isn't a huge difference from everyday use when comparing both of them. And the M8 is expected to get its Sense 7 software update later this year. Dating back to the HTC One M7, I was already a huge fan of the software. I felt that it gave a really clean and responsive interface, and it was one of these skins that I almost preferred over stock Android at times. HTC focused a lot on the visual interface, and really the only thing I wasn't a huge fan of was the vertical app drawer. The quick toggle settings look great and they don't really get in your way unless you want to use them, and the settings menu is a really clean look to it as well, which is something that I noticed throughout the software. In Sense 7 though, they have made changes here and there, but I'm going to talk about it from a point of view as to what I noticed from everyday uses. Blink feed has definitely been improved, but I never really found myself using that much. The app drawer has a nice color scheme to it, and that is thanks to the themes that you're able to have extra customization to this time, and also the recent apps drawer has implemented a card view, which allows you to see all your windows at once. Another thing is the personalized home screen, which allows you to set location-based app drawers, so whether you're at work, at home, it will automatically switch your app drawer. However, I have turned that off as well. But other than that, I have to say pretty much everything else has stayed really familiar and felt the same. And being a pretty big fan of previous versions of the software, I'm totally fine with that. Moving on to the camera, this is one of the categories that has hurt HTC a lot in the past and was probably one of the biggest flaws in their great smartphone. Gone is the 4 ultra pixel camera, and what they have brought in this year is a 20 megapixel rear facing camera. HTC also experimented with the dual camera with depth imaging technology on the M8, however they have kind of forgotten about that in the M9, as I'm sure a lot of you never really used that. Giving you a quick glance at the camera software, it is much alike the rest of its interface. It stays very simple, it's very visually appealing, and there is a few settings here and there, but it isn't overly intimidating as to something like Samsung's camera software, which is completely feature packed and there's settings everywhere. That being said, you can also still set the exposure, the white balance, ISO, and stuff like that. So taking a look at some side-by-side photos between the M8 and the M9, you would see that the M8 did an absolutely horrible job. The ultra-pixel technology with larger pixel size in the sensor was meant to allow more light into the sensor, but you would see that the photos are completely blown out in some cases, and the amount of detail it captured just wasn't great at all. However, the situation with the M9 isn't that great either. Although we do have a 20 megapixel sensor, the photos do still look really off in terms of the color and exposure, and I'm not sure if that's just because of the sensor or the way that HTC processes the images. But I really hope that things can be fixed with software in the near future. On the front of the M9, you've got an ultra pixel camera now, while on the M8 you had a 5 megapixel camera. And one great thing to see here is that there is definitely a huge improvement in the quality in the front facing camera when compared to the M8. Taking a look at some video, the HTC One M9 can record 4K video, while the HTC One M8 records 1080p video. The quality here once again was nothing to be really impressed about, especially on the M8, but on the M9 the issues were more the color balance as well as the exposure. It almost seemed undecisive at times. So generally speaking, I would say the camera is an improvement, but not a reason to upgrade. Moving away from that camera, it is one of the best features that are seen only on HTC devices, and that is the Boom Sound surround experience front-facing speakers. Over the past few years, HTC has definitely done it right, and the Boom Sound speakers just seem to be getting better and better, and they are by far the best speakers on any smartphone on the market. The speakers on the M8 and M9 have pretty much stayed the same, however some may say that it is slightly better than the M8, but I really didn't notice much of a difference. But either way, I'm going to give you a test of its sound just to give you a feel for the experience. As for the battery life, the HTC One M9 has a larger 2840 mAh battery compared to 2600 mAh on the M8. But you also have to keep in mind the upgraded specs will definitely hog that extra 240 mAh. On the M8, I was typically able to get about 7 to 8 hours of battery from it, and that is good but not amazing. On the M9, however, I was currently getting about 4 to 6 hours of battery, but you have to remember that this device did just come out, and with software updates, it is almost always that the battery life is improved. There's also the extreme power saving mode, which pretty much allows you to only use the major resources such as calling, messages, mail, calendar, and calculator in order to maximize the battery life if you need to do something important. The last thing we're going to look at is the benchmark score. In terms of spec bumps, like I mentioned at the start of the video, the M9 has a Snapdragon 810 processor, which is an octa-core processor, while the M8 has the Snapdragon 801 processor. On that M9, you've also got nearly 3 gigs of RAM as opposed to 2 gigs of RAM on the M8. But I'm going to tell you, despite these gains in terms of the benchmark scores, from using the device in everyday uses, general tasks, you really won't notice any difference whatsoever. Some may notice that the device is slightly snappier, but I found that both of them worked just fine and were very responsive. So this has just been my full comparison between the HTC One M9 and the predecessor, the HTC One M8. And in terms of the final verdict, I'm going to say that if you have the M8, there really isn't any huge reason to upgrade to the M9. The camera was supposed to be a huge upgrade point, but as we saw from the tests, it was somewhat a disappointment, but hopefully HTC can fix that through software updates coming soon. However, if you are looking for a new device, the M9 is the best flagship from HTC at the moment, but if the M8 is still available, you definitely can't go wrong with that, and you're also saving a bit of money. Other than that, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button as it helps the channel out as always, and I'll see you all in the next one.